My name is Lena Carter. I used to be a Navy SEAL, but now I choose a peaceful life in a small cabin near the forest. On my free days, I often go fishing by the river, a habit that helps me relax and leave behind the stressful memories of the past. That day, the sky was overcast and the wind was strong. I had been fishing all morning, but hadn't caught anything worthwhile. The bait kept getting swept away by the strong current, and the fishing line constantly snagged on rocks at the riverbed. I started to feel frustrated and decided to pack up early. As I lifted the tackle box, I muttered to myself, "What a waste of time, spent the whole day for nothing." Instead of taking the familiar trail, I chose a shortcut through the forest. This path was rarely used, overgrown with trees and eerily quiet. As I walked, I tried to shake off my foul mood, thinking a cup of hot tea at home would be a small reward to comfort myself. But as I turned a corner, I froze. Standing right in front of me, just a few steps away, was a massive black bear. I couldn't mistake it. It was a mother bear, and it was injured. My stomach clenched. My heart pounded so hard it felt like it might burst out of my chest. I tried to stay calm and immediately raised my hands high to make myself look bigger. It was a basic technique I had learned during my military days for encounters with bears. I whispered, as if to reassure myself, "It's okay, Lena, stay calm. Don't scare it." The bear didn't attack. It just stood there, panting. I noticed blood on its shiny black fur, deep scratches visible on its belly and legs. It looked at me, not with aggression, but with pain in its eyes. "What happened to you?" I murmured, not expecting an answer. The bear suddenly sat down, whining desperately. I couldn't understand what was happening, but I felt the helplessness in its cries. Part of me wanted to turn around and run, but another part wouldn't let me leave. Didn't feel like a threat. It felt like a plea for help. Suddenly, I remembered the scene from that morning while I was fishing. I had seen a mother bear and her cub playing by the riverbank. They looked so happy, a gentle moment in the day. But now, the cub was nowhere to be seen. A dreadful feeling came over me. "Where's your cub?" I asked, even though I knew there would be no answer. The bear tilted its head slightly and let out a short but pained sound. It turned around, walking slowly toward the river, then stopped and looked back at me. Its gaze seemed to say, "Follow me." I stood still for a moment, my mind in turmoil. My instincts told me this was an opportunity to help, but was it worth risking my life? Memories of the time I failed to save a teammate came rushing back. That pain had never gone away. I bit my lip and told myself, "I can't let that happen again." "I'll help you, but don't make me regret this," I whispered, then started following the bear. I could feel its anxiety in every step it took. It didn't look back at me again, as if it trusted I would do the right thing. My chest filled with unease, but I knew I couldn't turn back. I followed the mother bear, my heart heavy with worry about what lay ahead. She moved slowly, occasionally glancing back to ensure I was still following. Her steps seemed weighed down, not just by her injuries, but also by a deep despair. As we neared the river, the sound of the rushing water grew louder. A chill ran down my spine. The river was especially violent today, as if warning that this place wasn't meant for any living creature. What's waiting there? I wondered, but I kept walking. Finally, we reached the riverbank. I looked around and saw nothing but the raging current, but the mother bear didn't stop. She walked to the water's edge, let out a short growl, then turned to look at me. I had never seen eyes like hers, not the eyes of a wild animal, but the eyes of a mother begging for help. "Where's the cub?" I muttered, scanning the area more carefully. Then I saw it, a small, soaked head clinging desperately to a rock in the middle of the river. The cub! It was struggling to keep itself above water, but the current was too strong. I could see it was exhausted, and if it let go, it would be swept away instantly. "I can't believe this," I gasped. The mother bear growled again, this time longer, her cry echoing through the air like a desperate call to her cub. But the little bear was too weak to respond. I watched it flounder, and my chest tightened. "There's not much time," I muttered. Chaotic thoughts raced through my mind. I knew how powerful that current was. Just this morning, my fishing line had been swept away repeatedly. Even with my swimming experience, I wasn't sure I could fight the current to save the cub. I looked at the mother bear. She didn't move, just stood there, her black eyes fixed on me as if saying, "Please." I took a deep breath to steady myself. All right, all right, I said louder, as if to reassure both myself and the bear. I'll do my best, but you have to let me handle this, okay? I rummaged through my fishing gear and pulled out a rope. It was long and sturdy, the kind I usually use for hauling fishing nets. I tied one end of the rope to a nearby tree trunk and the other securely around my waist. My palms were slick with sweat as I tightened the knots, but I forced myself to stay focused. The mother bear watched as I worked, then stepped closer. I tensed, bracing myself in case she acted unpredictably, but she only stood there, almost as if inspecting what I was doing. I know you're worried, I said, trying to calm her, but trust me, I'm just as worried as you are. Once everything was ready, I turned back to the cub. It was still clinging to the rock, but it looked even weaker now. Don't let go, little one, I murmured. I'm coming for you. I stepped into the water. It was freezing. The current wrapped around my legs, trying to drag me away immediately. I gripped the rope tightly and started swimming, every stroke a battle. The current was stronger than I had anticipated, and I quickly lost my sense of direction. Focus, Lena, I told myself. Head for the rock. Small waves splashed into my face, making me cough and sputter, but I didn't stop. As I got closer to the rock, I could see the cub more clearly. It looked so small and frail, its eyes closed as if it had given up already. No, little one, don't give up, I shouted. I'm almost there. I reached out toward it, but a sudden surge of water pushed me off course. I screamed in frustration at myself. You've got to do better than this, Lena. I adjusted my course and finally reached the rock. As my hand touched its slippery surface, I gasped for air, feeling like I had just climbed a mountain. The cub opened its eyes, looking at me with a faint, exhausted gaze. I extended my hand, speaking softly. It's okay. I'm here to help you. It didn't resist as I pulled it into my arms. Its body was ice cold and almost lifeless. I tied a loop of rope around its small frame, snug but loose enough to keep it comfortable. Now, let's get back to the shore, I said, though I wasn't sure I had the strength to make it. The journey back was 10 times harder. The current kept pushing me backward, and even though the cub was small, it added significant weight. I used every ounce of strength I had left, focusing on the spot where the mother bear was waiting. I'm not giving up, I whispered to myself, each breath a painful effort. At last, my feet touched the riverbed. I almost collapsed as I stumbled onto the shore, still holding the cub tightly in my arms. The mother bear roared and rushed toward me, but I wasn't afraid. She stopped just short of me, her eyes fixed on the cub in my arms. She let out a sound, not a roar, but an emotional whimper. Here's your cub, I said, gently placing it on the ground. I collapsed onto the grass, utterly spent but relieved. The mother bear leaned down, inspecting her cub closely, her nose nudging it gently. I felt like I had just weathered a great storm, but deep down, I knew it wasn't truly over yet. I barely had time to catch my breath after wrestling with the river when another unexpected situation unfolded. The cub lay still on the ground, breathing heavily but still alive. However, the mother bear didn't seem at ease. She stood there, looking back and forth between her cub and me, letting out short, anxious growls. What now? I muttered, forcing myself to stand. I wiped the water from my face and tried to focus. It was then that I noticed the deep wounds on the mother bear. Blood oozed from large gashes, some bruised and swollen, others still fresh and bleeding. This bear wasn't just injured from exertion. It had clearly been attacked by something. Another bear? A wolf? I couldn't be sure, but her condition was far worse than I had realized. The mother bear whimpered, then suddenly sank down in front of me. She lowered her head as if pleading for something. I had never seen a wild animal express such raw desperation. Wait, I said, my voice edged with concern. What do you want? I just pulled your cub out of the river, and now it's your turn? But the mother bear didn't do anything else. She just lay there, motionless. I could tell she was completely exhausted. Her body trembled, but her eyes seemed to beg me to understand. I crouched down to check on the cub. It was still breathing, but its breaths were shallow and weak. I didn't know if it would make it, but I couldn't just walk away. I glanced at the mother bear. You're out of strength, I whispered. I get it. You're doing everything you can to save your cub. I took a deep breath, trying to gather myself. Suddenly, the cub stirred slightly, as if trying to roll over, but it was too weak and slumped back down. My heart clenched. I leaned close, pressing my ear against its tiny chest to listen for a heartbeat. It was still there, but faint. Damn it, I don't know what to do, I muttered. You want me to save it? I don't even know how to help animals. I recalled the first aid training I'd received during my time in the military. If this were a human, what would I do? CPR. Would it work on a bear? Probably not, but I had to try. All right, little one, I can't make any promises, but I'll give it my best, I said, as if to reassure both the cub and myself. I placed my hands gently on the cub's chest, pressing lightly to avoid causing more harm. The first compression yielded no response. Neither did the second. I leaned down and blew air into its nose, feeling completely helpless. You've got to fight, I yelled, my voice blending with the roar of the rushing river. I kept going, alternating chest compressions with breaths, losing track of time, sweat mixed with the river water still dripping from my face. My arms burned, my head spun, but I didn't stop. Finally, a miracle happened. The cub began to cough weakly, its breathing becoming steadier. It twitched slightly, then opened its eyes. I collapsed onto the ground, gasping for air, unable to believe what I was seeing. Thank you, God, I whispered, my eyes fixed on the little bear. You did it, kid. The mother bear, realizing her cub was awake, stood up suddenly. She approached, nudging the cub with her nose as if to confirm it was alive. I stepped back a few paces to give them space, not wanting to intrude on their moment. But just as I thought everything was finally okay, the mother bear suddenly staggered and collapsed to the ground. No, I shouted, rushing toward her. She lay there motionless. Only now did I fully grasp how much blood she had lost. The wounds on her body looked far worse than they had initially. I knew that without immediate help, she wouldn't make it. I rummaged through my bag. There was nothing to stop the bleeding or clean the wounds. I looked around, but there was nothing useful. Damn it, I muttered, frustration and helplessness washing over me. The cub crawled toward its mother, letting out weak cries. I knelt down, my hands trembling as they touched the thick fur of the mother bear. I don't know what to do, I said hoarsely. I don't have what I need to help you. I knew I needed to find help, but my cabin was too far away, and I didn't have my phone with me. It would take hours to go back and return, and the mother bear might not survive that long. As I desperately tried to think of a solution, a sound reached my ears. I lifted my head and listened carefully. The noise grew louder, clearer, the rumble of a truck engine. I jumped to my feet and shouted, "Over here! I need help! Somebody!" A group of people emerged from the forest. I recognized them as park rangers, clad in uniforms and carrying equipment. One of them approached, his expression serious as he took in the scene. "Are you okay?" he asked. "I'm fine, but the mother bear isn't," I replied, my voice strained. "She's badly injured, and I don't think she has much time." The rangers immediately sprang into action. They had bandages, first aid supplies, and a large container to transport the bear. I stepped back to give them space, but my eyes remained fixed on the bear and her cub. "Please, save them," I said, almost pleading. "We'll do our best," one of them replied with a determined look. As the mother bear was lifted onto the truck and the cub climbed in after her, I sank to the ground, completely spent. My body ached all over, but inside me a glimmer of hope began to grow. Perhaps this story wasn't over yet. I followed the rangers as they loaded the mother bear and her cub onto the truck. Before the doors closed, I stood there watching. Both the mother and cub were utterly exhausted. The cub lay close to its mother, trying to move but too weak. The mother bear, unable to do much, tilted her head slightly, her eyes filled with worry for her cub. "What are you planning to do next?" one of the rangers asked me, his tone carrying a hint of concern. "I can't leave them. I'm coming along?" I replied without hesitation. He nodded. "All right, but you need to rest. You look exhausted." "No," I said firmly, shaking my head. "I'm fine. They need me." On the way to the wildlife hospital, I sat silently in the back seat of the truck. Everything had happened so fast that I hadn't had time to process it. My mind was entirely focused on the mother bear and her cub. Questions swirled endlessly. Would the mother bear survive? Could the cub make it without her? "We'll do everything we can," the ranger beside me said, as if reading my thoughts. "I hope so," I replied, staring out the window. When we arrived, the veterinarians and hospital staff were already waiting. The mother bear was placed on a stretcher and a staff member carried the cub. I stood close by watching every move they made, my heart heavy with concern. "You need to rest," one of the staff members said, gently patting my shoulder. "We'll take care of them." "I can't leave," I replied, my eyes glued to the mother and cub. They didn't force me to leave. I stood in the corner of the room, watching the veterinarians work. They carefully examined the mother bear's wounds, cleaning and bandaging them. The amount of blood she had lost made her condition more critical than I had realized. "She's incredibly strong," one of the vets remarked. "To survive these injuries this long is nothing short of a miracle." I nodded, whispering, "She's done it all for her cub. That gives her strength." The cub wasn't in much better shape. It was tiny and fragile, barely holding on to what little energy it had left. I could sense its fragility in its faint, labored breaths. "Will she make it?" I asked, unable to hide my concern. "We're not sure," one of the vets replied, "but we'll do everything we can." I sank into a chair, a wave of helplessness washing over me. I had done everything I could, but now the outcome was out of my hands. A while later, one of the vets approached me. "We've done everything we can for now, but she'll need time to heal, and so will the cub. For the moment, keeping them close together will help them both recover." "Thank you," I said, my voice trembling with emotion. They led me to an observation area where I could see the mother and cub through a glass window. They had been placed in a large enclosure. The mother bear lay still, completely spent, while the cub curled up beside her. The sight of them together overwhelmed me with emotion. I stood there, my eyes fixed on the mother and cub. Time seemed to stand still. Memories of the journey I had just been through flooded my mind. The raging river, the desperate look in the mother bear's eyes, the moments I fought with everything I had to save the cub. It all felt like a dream, yet I knew it was undeniably real. A staff member from the hospital approached me, speaking softly. "You've done an incredible job. Thanks to you, they still have a chance." I didn't reply, simply nodding. My gaze never left the scene inside the enclosure. The cub stirred slightly, pressing closer to its mother. Though exhausted, the mother bear tilted her head and gently placed a paw over her cub, as if to protect it. I exhaled deeply, feeling a slight sense of relief. But deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. There were still many challenges ahead for both the bears and me. "I'm staying," I told the staff member. "No matter how long it takes, I'll be here." The staff member smiled warmly. "You're truly remarkable. I'm sure they can feel that." I wasn't sure if I was remarkable. All I knew was that I couldn't leave, not while they still needed me. I spent the first night at the wildlife hospital, never taking my eyes off the mother and cub through the glass window. The mother bear remained motionless, her body weak and exhausted, while the cub lay curled beside her, its breathing steady but faint. Though I knew there was nothing more I could do, I couldn't bring myself to leave. The next morning, a veterinarian walked in holding a clipboard. He stopped beside me and said, "Miss Carter, you should rest. We'll continue monitoring their condition." "I can't," I replied, my voice raspy from lack of sleep. "Any updates on them?" "She made it through the first night, but her condition is still critical. She's lost a lot of blood, and some of her wounds are infected. We're treating her, but the risks are still high," he explained. "The cub is more stable, but it needs time to regain its strength." I nodded, feeling a faint sense of relief. "Thank you. Let me know if there's anything I can do." In the days that followed, I rarely left the observation area. Every time I saw the mother bear stir slightly or heard the cub's faint calls, a flicker of hope warmed my heart. The vets and staff worked tirelessly, each person giving their all to help the bears overcome their ordeal. One afternoon, as I sat watching through the glass, I saw the cub stand for the first time. It wobbled unsteadily, taking a few steps toward its mother. Though still very weak, the mother bear managed to tilt her head and gently nudge her cub with her nose, as if to reassure it. "Do you see that?" a hospital staff member said beside me, his voice filled with excitement. "The cub is recovering. That's a huge boost for the mother bear's spirit as well." I smiled, my eyes still fixed on the scene inside. "They're stronger than I thought." "That's because you didn't give up on them," he added, as if to remind me that none of this would have been possible without the risk I took to save them. The following days were full of challenges. The mother bear's severe infections required strong medications to treat, and at times her condition worsened, leaving my heart in knots. But slowly, bit by bit, she began to recover. Each morning I asked the vets about their progress, and gradually the answers became more optimistic. She's eating more now. The cub has started playing in the enclosure. These updates were like tiny lights guiding me through a long, dark journey. Finally, after 2 weeks, a veterinarian approached me with a smile. "We have some good news," he said. "They're healthy enough to be moved to a larger enclosure. There, they'll have more space to move around and recover even better." "Really?" I asked, barely containing my excitement. He nodded. "Would you like to come with us?" I didn't need to think. Of course. We escorted the mother and cub to a larger enclosure at the back of the hospital. It was a space designed to mimic a natural environment, with trees and green grass. When the gate opened, the cub ventured out first, followed by the mother bear. Though still a bit weak, both of them seemed more at ease with the larger space to move around. I stood at a distance, watching them. The cub ran and jumped around its mother, occasionally returning to her side for reassurance. The mother bear, moving slowly but with more energy than before, seemed to be regaining her strength. A sense of pride welled up inside me. A staff member walked up beside me and lightly patted my shoulder. "Miss Carter, they're here because of you. I think they owe you a great deal." I smiled, my eyes never leaving the bears. "No, I'm the one who owes them. They reminded me that sometimes we have to take risks to protect what truly matters." I stood there for a long time, feeling a sense of relief I hadn't felt since the day I first encountered them. But I knew their journey wasn't over yet, and I would be here, watching over them, until they were fully ready to return to the wild. After nearly a month of treatment, the mother bear and her cub were finally ready to return to the forest. That day, the sky was clear and blue, and the cool air seemed to echo nature's celebration of their return. "Would you like to come along?" one of the rangers asked as I stood by the truck where the bears were being prepared for transport. "Absolutely," I replied without hesitation, unable to miss this moment. We ventured deep into the forest to a secluded area far from human habitation, where the environment closely resembled their original home. The truck stopped in a wide clearing surrounded by lush green trees. The rangers opened the cage door, and I stepped back, giving the mother and cub the space they needed. The cub stepped out first, much more agile than when I had first seen it. It paused briefly, glancing around as if getting acquainted with its new surroundings. The mother bear followed, her steps still measured but far steadier. She turned back to look at me, her eyes calm and gentle in a way I hadn't seen before. "Go on," I said softly, my throat tightening. "Your home is waiting." The mother bear let out a low growl, almost like a final farewell, then led her cub into the forest. I stood there, watching as their forms disappeared into the trees, my heart filled with both joy and a touch of sadness. A ranger came up beside me. "You've done something incredible, Lena. Not everyone would have taken the risks you did." "Thank you," I replied, my eyes still fixed on the forest. "But I think they're the truly remarkable ones. Their love for each other inspired me." I left the forest with a lighter heart, thinking it was the last time I would see them. But one morning, as I sipped my coffee on the porch, I spotted a familiar silhouette at the edge of the woods. The mother bear and her cub stood there, gazing in my direction. They didn't come closer, just stood still for a moment, as if to say thank you. I smiled and whispered, "Thank you, too, for everything." From that day on, I knew that, though we belonged to different worlds, an invisible bond would forever connect us.